So I'm just going to get to it. And so the way the Robinson safety course works is you apply on the Robinson website. They have a number of classes, and I would recommend kind of looking at some of these classes. I'm going to share my screen here, as everybody can see that. We want.
I'm not seeing it yet.
Okay, let's see. We want.
Hold on. Maybe click on my stream. Yeah. Now I can see it.
Okay, let's see. Share my screen. We're going to turn that off. Change stream to this. Okay, so when you're looking at the Robinson safety course, there's a number of the Robinson pilot safety course. There's a number of courses. Our 66 transition course, the autopilot course, which is interesting. Post maintenance, it doesn't maintenance pilot safety, and then instructor pilot standardization course. This I am going to take. That's going to be down the road a little bit, but these things are available. Just enroll. Robinson will generally give you like a confirmation letter. So give yourself a little bit of extra time. Plan in advance because the courses are filling up relatively quickly. So something to consider. And
how many people do you have out there?
There was 30 people in the class.
Okay, good.
30 people, yeah. Okay, and so basically, first day is formalities. It's 8 to 5 day 1, 8 to 5 day 2. And then on day 3, it's 8 to 11 ground. So 8 to 5, day 1 and 2 is ground. 8 to 11, day 3 is ground, followed by flying from 1100 to 1600. I was at 1600 on day 3. And then there's day 4, which is 8 to 11 ground, followed by a test, and then the remaining flight portions. You can fly the 22, the 44, the 66. Most people chose the 22. I have an equal amount of time in both, and I'm flying the 60 or the 22 right now primarily. So I just jumped into that, and it saved me money. So I didn't really see any benefit in flying the 44 over the 66. I think it's just a matter of preference. A lot of the pilots were similar to me, 180 hours working on commercial or instrument or CFI. A lot of guys just in there that were anxious to learn. A couple guys were really experienced. There's a handful of very experienced people in there, both fixed wing and Robinson guys. Some guys that haven't even really flown many Robinsons, but ultimately, it's funny. One guy's like, "Yeah, I'm here just to put it on my resume," and it is a valuable resume adder for sure. So those of you that are interested in doing it for that purpose, it's certain you will. Though it's valuable to your resume, you're gonna come out with some really valuable information that you'll be excited about. So my opinion, I don't think it matters whether you choose the 22 or the 44. I like the 22 in that we were doing a lot of autos. I'll talk about the flight portion here, but there was a lot of discussion about the inertia in the rotor system of the 22 as opposed to the 44. So I'll elaborate on that a little bit. But I want to get better at autos in the 22, and they really follow the book, right? So if you follow the POH and emergency procedures, how to enter an auto rotation, that's how they do it, and that's how they do everything. Whatever the POH says or the manual, that's how they want you to do it. And so we all have our ideas of how we should do things. We learn from a number of instructors, and they're like, oh, well, I like to do it this way, etc. Their first question is why. And like you can make arguments for the reason why you do it, but ultimately we end up coming back with following the POH. So just a quick overview of what day 1 looked like. And then I'll kind of address specific topics that I thought were most effective. So the flight safety overview, really the whole point of this class is to understand flight safety, what causes the bulk of accidents. 2025 for Robinson was the least amount of accidents on record, meaning that these classes are starting to take hold. There's been about, I want to say G said there was maybe, I'm going to say 40,000, but that seems crazy. Let's say at least 10,000 students who have gone through these classes. Could very well be 40,000. Frank started teaching them in the late 80s, early 90s. So the bulk is what we do is we kind of look at, they analyze data and flight accidents, and then talk about why they happened and what were the kind of the causes. And so there's strategic placement for each accident based off the main topics at the time. But ultimately, it comes down to a couple things. And it comes down to it, like, for some reason won't let me save the whole screen. It only lets me pick a specific. Oh wait, entire screen. There we go. I had it. Sorry. Just 1 second, everybody. Entire screen.
Gotcha.
We want this screen. There we go. Okay. So these are just some of my notes from the class. The 3 pillars of training, which are education, or safety, education, training, and then regulations and oversight. And so really coming down to kind of understanding our training. And one of the things that stood out on day one were really the differences in reaction versus a response, and what you're training, what ultimately happens in an incident. What do you respond or do you react? And you fall back on the level of your training. So an example of that would be, for example, if someone accidentally, and we saw a video of this, someone accidentally pulls the mixture instead of the carb heat, engine shuts off, and what they do immediately is they went back and pushed the mixture back down rather than reacted to an engine out, which would be enter an auto rotation. So there's that reaction of like, oh shit, what do I do now? But if you train yourself to understand what the solution is for the incident, then your reaction is more of a response than a reaction, right? How do we respond to this incident? So another example of that I thought was pretty interesting, and he asked the class how many people have taken off with their doors open, or in the door pops open in flight, and half the room raised their hand. That hasn't happened to me yet, but I've heard about it quite a bit. Hopefully it never does. But what some of the reaction was is pilot picks up, door opens, and then what do? Do you are they using their right hand to try to close the door, or are they reaching with their left hand to close the door? And that's the reaction. Whereas the response in the training should be that if that door opens, know that you can fly, set the helicopter down, and then shut the door, right? So there's that kind of disconnect of I react or I know how to respond. There was an example of a not stuck left pedal, but a pilot who was too hard on the left pedal at pickup, and we, as they got light, the helicopter started spinning like crazy to the left. The solution for the pilot was they didn't recognize that their left foot was the problem. Their solution was to reach back and try to grab the rotor brake, and they're pulling the rotor brake. But think about what's happening while that's happening. You're at 104% RPM in the R44. The blade's spinning at full speed. You're in flight mode. Your hard left pedal. Their training didn't kick in that, hey, we need to either kill the mixture, roll off throttle, or hard right pedal. And they didn't do any of those things. And eventually the helicopter came to a stop, but pulling the brake wasn't the solution. She eventually caught it and did hard right pedal. So reaction versus response, and that kind of it struck me, and it started to make sense to me. And another thing that they were talking about was there's a lot of training in auto rotations, but how often does the helicopter actually require you to enter an auto rotation? We become very proficient at them, and we train a lot to them. But that's not really the bulk of emergencies. We need to understand what are the scenarios that get us into, or what are the situations that will cause a scenario for there to be emergency, and how do we train to, one, avoid it, but two, what happens if it happens? And it may not necessarily be an auto rotation. So we learned a lot about the main rotor design, the philosophy, everything behind it, why it is what it is. It's a improved tri-hinge. It's kind of he called it an improved semi-rigid rotor system. I'm not going to get into the details of that, just understanding that it's a very reliable system. Yes, it does potentially lead to low G mass bumping, but low G mass bumping doesn't just happen. There's usually a cause for it to happen. Flying into turbulence, as we know, right? Unusual attitudes, running into IIMC conditions, distractions, exceeding airspeed and
Limitations.
yeah, exceeding limitations, right? So low G or like pushing forward cyclic, right? But what no you can do that and you can recover from that, but we're trained to not do that. Most pilots know not to push forward, on the cyclic, but what conditions could lead to that? So and those are the conditions that lead to low G, to lead to mass bumping. So mass bumping isn't just an inherent thing that Robinsons do. It's usually a condition that leads to that. So lower rotor RPM stall, that's something certainly that we all have to consider in all helicopters, and that does happen. We talk a lot about that, but what are the conditions that lead to that, and how do you avoid those conditions? Wire strike awareness. This is this is the leading cause of accidents across in helicopters across the industry and all fleets. And talking about this was really kind of fun because the way G explained it is that the wire's there, you just haven't seen it yet. And we all are trained to fly for the top of the tower or fly over the tower, that there's wires in other places that we can't see, but there's more to it than that. We just need to always assume that there's wires everywhere. And especially in the United States, anything under 200 feet isn't marked. So if it can, I mean, not anything, but there's things under 200 feet that AGL that don't have to be marked, where anything above 200 feet does. So in Europe, or in Canada, it's 250. In Europe, I think it's 500, but in the United States, it's 200. So what are some of the solutions and some of the things we can do to mitigate these wire strikes? One, we assume that they're there. Two, fly at 500 feet AGL or higher. G's generally he's a big proponent of 1,000 feet, and as am I. I like to fly 1,000 feet, or 1,500, right? But it depends on the winds, right? The conditions may force you down, and if that's the case, we're we're going to take extra precaution, but generally around 500. And then the other part of this is, one, assume that the wires are there. And that's when we do our high recon. We're really looking for those things. And then two, our low recon should be a simulated approach. So if we're at 500 feet AGL doing our high recon, as we come from downwind into our base to final, allow that final to be a simulated approach at your low recon. So kind of bring yourself down just off the site. So if your LZ's here, just off the site, so you can kind of look at where your landing zone is going to be, and then examine for those inevitable wires that you are assuming are there and just proving that they're not. So your low recon is not a orbit at 300 feet or 200 feet or whatever it is. It's a low approach. And at that point, that's when you're doing your power check. I like the idea of doing my power check to make sure we can get in out of those spots with a level attitude, no ascent, no ascending or descending, and then kind of checking our power as we're coming in and slowing down for that low approach. Find out what our manifold pressure is. Do we have enough power to get in? Do we have enough power to get out? Another discussion was, on your high recon, make sure you're outside of the power curve, but essentially come to a hover far off of your point and see out of ground effect hover and see what you're pulling. See what your what your manifold pressure is. Are you going to have enough power to get in and to get out of that spot at altitude? Which brings up the height, or the IGE, OGE,
Iggy and Hoagie.
yep, Higgy and Hoagie charts. And so I was talking a little bit with confirmation with how to read these charts. Early on, for some reason, my instructor told me, okay, what's your weight? And then what can our altitude be? And our hover altitude. And that's the inaccurate way to read this chart. And I kind of knew that. I learned that over time, but it's really, what is our pressure altitude for where we're going? What is the temperature where we are? So say we're at 9,000 and it's 20 degrees. So our pressure altitude for where we are going the temperature is 20 degrees where we anticipate to be, that will dictate what our weight can be when we get there. So that's when we need to calculate fuel burn and weight when we get to to our spot, or for an in-ground effect hover and for an out-of-ground effect hover. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's planning ahead. It's not planning for the moment, and that's something that kind of made sense to me. But it took me a minute to kind of. I was appreciating them kind of spending a little bit of time on that. So a big portion too of a lot of the incidents here are distractions, right? So there's a video of a guy eating a sandwich, flying an R66 at 110 knots, 120 knots. He flew into a gnarly turbulent scenario, and he was distracted. He had no idea that he was even getting into a scenario that was going to lead to some mass bumping. And so how often are we focused on our iPhones or on our our iPads in flight, and we're kind of distracted? That leads to a lot of factors. So more analysis of all the data from the day, you get these kind of breakdowns of these charts, or the course. A lot of resources that they send. I'm going to get into day 2 now, because there was some really good stuff in day 2 that I really found valuable, and I was looking for answers, and I got some really good answers from these guys. So, God, sorry guys, this thing's just, there's something in my throat and I cannot get it out. A lot of the issues in are things that we work to mitigate risk, right? So there's things we can certainly control, or when we're trying to mitigate risk, like our training, following checklists, following our SOPs, doing a thorough pre-flight, making sure that we have a good flight plan, checking the weather. And weather is one of the bigger incidences for accidents, especially IMC. A lot of pilots get into that. We've all seen the video 56 Seconds to Live. I'll add that in a link to the pre-recording or the post-recording of this video in the YouTube. But what I really like is the follow-up from Tucker and the other guy from Bell. But avoiding these conditions are the best scenarios to keep us safe in these conditions. So, how proficient are we at actually flying instrument-rated helicopter pilots? How we might be current, but are we proficient? And so there was a lot of discussion of currency and proficiency. And a lot of pilots find that, just because you're IFR rated doesn't mean you necessarily know how to fly in IIMC conditions. And there was a lot of discussion of like, get up there in a fixed-wing aircraft, allow yourself to get into those conditions in an aircraft in some fixed wing with a rated pilots who are comfortable at flying in those conditions, and see what it feels like for that spatial disorientation. And that could potentially be some of the best training we do, because a lot of these helicopters obviously aren't IFR rated, so we're simulating it, but we're not actually in it. And so spatial disorientation is one of the biggest issues. And basically what G is saying is, if you get into it, you will crash. There's nothing you can do. And we saw a lot of videos about it. We saw a lot of tragic videos. And it really, the data shows that if helicopter pilots getting into IIMC conditions do not survive. You just don't. And the ones that will are the ones that are best trained for it. But even then, it's still gonna be a challenge. So what's the best solution? The solution is avoidance. So I kind of went on that a little bit longer than I anticipated. So I want to kind of lead that into this carburetor icing discussion. And the carburetor icing was something that I had a lot of questions about. And I'll also post a video of Frank Robinson talking about carb icing in the 22. I have that video. It's not on YouTube, but I do have a link to it, which I asked for. So Let's
Have
look at.
you heard?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Have you heard that Richard Morningstar Sanford guy
Talk about it.
on carburetor?
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah. Have you? No, it's a podcast. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna send it to you.
Yeah, please do. Put it in the
But it,
chat here on the Discord. That'd be great.
yep.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to see that because I get the concept of what carburetor icing is, the Venturi effect, speeding up of air, moisture, cooling, etc. But the severity of it, I didn't really get, and also not that I didn't get it. It just where is it? How does it work in the 22 and the 44, and what's the big difference? And so here on the 22 and 44, we see that. The 22 can experience carburetor icing even when it's not in the yellow, and here's why. So the 22 only has enough space for the probe at the throat of the inlet of the carburetor before the butterfly. So we have a probe here. But what happens is the conditions are correct. There's going to be icing in the exhaust or the bypass portion of the butterfly in this second area. The 44's carburetor is bigger, so you can have a probe on this end. So the 22 is subject to carburetor icing, even when the needle is not in the yellow. And what does it say on the placard on the helicopter by the carburetor ice control? What does it say in the 22 that reminds you of this? And if you don't know, what it says is anything less than 18
Yeah, below
inches
18
of manifold
inches
pressure, yeah, apply carb heat. And so why is that? Because icing can occur in the 22 beyond the throat that we're unaware of. So that's why it is that way. That's why it says that. So this is a cool chart. I'm going to this has been up for a while, so plenty of opportunity to screenshot it, but I will add a screenshot to the Discord. This chart is useful. So one of the questions G had, he's like, okay, so who's not subject? Who's not who flies in an area where carburetor icing won't likely happen to you? And the guy raised his hand. He goes, okay, where are you flying? He's like, oh, I fly in South Florida. He's like, okay, well, what are the temperature? Let's pull up your local airport. Tell me what the temperature and dew point is, and dew point spread is. Temperature was 30, and the dew point spread was 5. It was 35. So that actually put that scenario where this is our dew point spread. So we just subtract. If it was 35, we just subtract that 5. So 30 and 35 and that 5 puts us at the dew point spread right here, which is indicating of light icing in cruise or descent power. So we should be pulling carb heat in descent power or in auto rotations, right? So
Yep.
This is a really good indication of what that carburetor icing scenario or the probability is. And we fly a lot of times right in this limit. So we're right here in this serious to moderate. And especially if you fly in a place that there's a fair amount of moisture and the dew point spread is close together. And I have been recently in North Carolina. So we're kind of always pulling power. So what does that mean? When we're pulling power, understanding the limitations section. So let's see, it's performance actually. No, it's limitations. So looking at the limitations chart, we got to understand what are our manifold pressures. These charts, these graphs are far more effective at understanding where full throttle is than these. So we're adding, subtracting, we're adding 0.9, we're adding 1.5 for carburetor. It can get a little bit of complex. It can get a little complex where we may be on our full throttle amount in our and the amount of inches we'll pull, but these are far more effective than these. So I'm going to start reading these as where our full throttle limits are. And we, frankly, in the 22 with 2 full-grown adults, we get there a lot quicker than people kind of imagine. So that was pretty enlightening too. Really good stuff. Okay, so again, back at following up with a little bit more on day 2. Hey, Diego, welcome, buddy. Following up a little bit more on day 2. Training to the EPs, right? So one thing I thought was really cool, he says, okay, so the fuel light comes on. Which way do you turn? Or if you have to turn, which way do you turn? Does anybody know the answer to that?
All right, say that again.
All right, so say your low fuel light comes on and you need to make a turn. Which way do you want to turn as opposed to which way do you not want to turn?
Nearest clear area to land, preferably into the wind.
Right, that's logical. But the answer is don't turn to the right because you can suck air into the fuel tank or into the carburetor because the fuel sloshing. If you turn to the right, you're going to drain fuel to the right and potentially suck air into the carburetor. So it was kind of an interesting idea. That's nowhere in the manual. That's nowhere in the POH. This is just information.
That's just experience.
Exactly. So this is kind of cool, and that's something I really want to try to get out there. This little bit of information I think is really valuable. So what's the solution here? To know that you should turn left and not make aggressive turns, or to never let the low fuel light come on?
Yeah, never let it get that way.
Never let it get that way, because you really only are sitting with on the 22, what is it, a gallon and a half, right? Or I think. So there's really not much fuel in there to begin with. So I've definitely flown to the point where we were getting close to the fuel light.
Yeah.
And is 2 gallons better than 1.5 gallons if you're making hard, aggressive right turns? Not necessarily, right? So just know when your fuel is getting low, making those hard right turns, aggressive maneuvers, can lead to suction of air rather than fuel. We want to keep that fuel from sloshing. So minimize the amount of maneuvering at low fuel. Try to make turns to the left if you can, and keep a low bank angle. Okay.
I'll give you a good scenario, John.
Sure.
So if you ever run into an aircraft that's gone from no bladders
right.
to bladders,
right,
and then they never updated the placard numbers,
right,
that's how you can kind of get into a situation like that, where you think you had enough fuel, but no, you didn't. So
yeah, that's concerning, right? I think my understanding is that most ships have bladders at this point, but just like and I'll talk about this coming up right now, but that the bulk of the fleet out there is old, right? The bulk of the fleet out there is a little bit rickety. Before I actually get into that, I want to talk a little bit about turbulence and wind. But yeah, that is concerning, right? I mean, his what he said was a lot of the fleet should have bladders at this point, and you're telling me that you've been in ones that haven't. So yeah, certainly something you also need to know, right? You need to know, does this ship have bladders or not?
Or that recently they went from aluminum to the bladders,
right,
but then they forgot to because there's a big difference between no bladders, and there's almost like two gallons out of there, or 4 gallons. I'm not sure,
right,
that you're missing a fuel, and that makes a difference.
That does certainly make a difference. Yep, no doubt about it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about night operations, featureless terrain, and flying in conditions that, well, again, there's that proficiency and there's that currency and proficiency, right? So all of us are likely night current. But how proficient are we, frankly, at night? And G said he had I think 5,000 night hours, but he would not consider himself proficient. And we're like all like, what, really, why? And then he showed a picture of where he flies, which is over LA, which looks like a giant Christmas tree, right? So there's no he doesn't ever find himself really in featureless terrain where there's not a lot to kind of guide yourself. And so you can easily get into scenarios where you lose sight of the horizon, you lose You get that spatial disorientation flying in dark, featureless areas. So if that's the case, what do we want to do? Obviously, we want to avoid the potential for danger there by what? Raising our altitude, and following our kind of night procedure, not making quick turns, not having a lot of lights in our cockpit, and just in kind of eliminating, or not eliminating, but mitigating that risk best we can. Featureless terrain. So a lot of guys have crashed at night because of that. A lot of guys have crashed over open glassy water. I have been flying a lot over water, and so this was kind of a little bit of a shocker to me, right? Like, hey, being conscious of what you're flying over. Flying over water is very hazardous. I knew this, but we're talking about it in with the safety notices. So a lot of bringing up of safety notices, a lot of analysis of safety notices during the class. Okay, so we were talking about, in particularly moving on to day 3. Day 3 was Day 3 was a lot of discussion about our go-arounds, high and low recons, which I talked a little bit about, but human factors and complacency. This transitioned into a big discussion about helicopter maintenance. And this we ended up talking about probably as a group for over an hour. Robinson's training helicopters are generally from the 90s. One of the helicopters, one of the R-44s, is 44 serial number 10. I reviewed that ship and it looked as if it was brand new. And we did a pre-flight on it, and I swear it looked brand new. And I was like, this is impossible that this is number 10, right? But that is what they set the expectation of what their maintenance and what the kind of the what the helicopters, they follow the protocol that they set. Obviously, this is the factory. They're not going to put ships out there that aren't up to standard. But it really made me realize that the bulk of the fleet out here that we're flying on is old, it's rickety, it's maintained to the, I'm not afraid to say this, to the bare minimum of what the expectations are. How many times have you got into a helicopter and you hear the pilot who's flown it a number of times, oh yeah, the collective has a tendency to want to rise on this one, so just be cautious, make sure you guard that collective, it's going to go up. Oh yeah, the heat doesn't work, or there's we don't run the heat because there might be a crack in the exhaust, or we might get that some carbon monoxide, or yeah, that gauge doesn't really work, it has a tendency to bounce around, yeah, the VSI is off by X number, or our attitude indicator doesn't work, or yeah, that compass, it just not actually it doesn't work that well, or yeah, we got to pull a lot of carb heat in this one for X, Y, and Z reason, or there's just a million things that when you get into a helicopter that they're like, yeah, this one has this problem, or this one isn't quite right for this reason, or yeah, it does, the rotors kind of make a weird noise, maintenance says it's okay, or yeah, those torque stripes are off, but it's no big deal, or yeah, our tail rotor's a little, that there's a seam in the end of that tail rotor, but yeah, they checked it and it's fine. How many times have you heard that, right? And if you're hearing those things and seeing those things, there's a reality is that there's the maintenance is not done to the level at which it should be. And it really put into perspective that, yeah, a lot of the helicopters we fly are maintained. They do their 100-hour, they do their annuals, etc. But are they really up to the standard that that is expected? And I realized that it's, it's not a realization so much as we all know that schools, it's a budget issue, right? I mean, how much time do they have to keep these helicopters in the tip-top performance? And how much are they willing to invest in keeping them in tip-top performance? Or are they just good enough? And we all know that they're pretty much just good enough. There's a line in the startup checklist that says, listen for unusual noises. I swear the helicopters I've been flying, every single one of them has unusual noises, unusual vibrations, right? I mean, I know it does because I've been in some newer helicopters or some better maintained helicopters that don't have those noises. and that's concerning, right? So again, this is mitigating that risk. And one of the issues that I have is that the flight controls in the helicopters that I'm flying are always loose or wobbly. They're never really as tight as they should be. And one thing that they said is, well, notice when you get in these helicopters, the flight controls are going to feel tighter. And that's because maintenance is just not adjusting those flight controls. They're just letting it kind of be how it is. And I think we should ask, hey, can you take some time to readjust these flight controls? And it's not that hard. It just takes time and effort. And maintenance they have fixed wing airplanes they got to work on. They have all these other elements that they're working on. They don't, it's like expensive to do it. And that's a safety issue, right? And that's a safety issue. And I think that I'm going to start flying with schools and in places that really take a little bit more effort and kind of focus a little bit more on that safety or that ship maintenance. I'm not calling anybody out in particular. I'm just saying I've been around a fair amount of helicopters at this point, flying a lot of different end numbers, and I'm going to be a little bit more kind of diligent on that, which leads me into the pre-flight discussion. How many times do we, in our pre-flight checklist, are we not necessarily following the checklist exactly as it should be, right? So there's where's the checklist? Where is the checklist in the POH?
Normal procedures, section 4.
Okay, there we go. Pre-flight checks. So everything in here should be verified, right? So I mean everything in here, and look at it says here, gearbox oil, no leaks, but also and the engine, no cracks, no leaks, no chafing, right? So we know sprag clutch, no leaks. How many times have you been into a helicopter that doesn't leak? Something's wrong, right? It's not maybe that it's leaking severely. That might not be the issue. It might not be an issue, but helicopters have a tendency to leak. But what is it that's leading to that? That doesn't mean it's unflyable, of course, but it's just something that we should keep in mind. There was no leaks on any of these helicopters. There was no oil buildup anywhere. These helicopters looked as if they were brand new. And of course, we'd expect Robinson to hold to that standard. But I also think that it's just an expectation of what like helicopters we're flying should look like. And also teletemps. That's another thing that I found interesting. Some of the teletemps on some of these helicopters are old. I don't know if they're getting replaced in the overhauls or in the annuals. I don't think that they are. Some of them are old, and at what point do they become ineffective? So something to think about. I mean, what does a thorough pre-flight look like? It looks like adjusting all of the, looking at all of these things and more. And one thing I kind of thought was pretty cool when we do our light and our kind of warning caution lights check at the beginning of our pre-flight here. Circuit breakers in. Where is it? Seatbelts, full frictions, throttle. Where's the lights? Oh, that's in the pre-flight.
Should be in the beginning.
Yeah, it should be in the beginning. Yeah, so we're checking all of our lights. One thing that we check is when we do our startup, why not, and we have our battery switch on and we're checking our lights, why not pull up the collective and see if that low rotor RPM and horn goes on before the helicopter's even on? Because if that light goes out, which they do, why go through this whole process just to find out, especially when we're with students, that after we run up, we've done this whole process, a whole pre-flight can take 40 minutes. We run up and then we find that light's not working. Check that light right away. And also, I don't know if you guys knew this, but those bulbs can just unscrew and you can screw in a new bulb. They're incandescent bulbs. So maybe we don't pull, like maybe that we check that light ourselves. That's not detailed maintenance. That's something a pilot can check. Check that light bulb. See if that light bulb is working by taking another bulb out and putting it in. Obviously, we don't want to do our main rotor temp or our oil or something like that, but maybe we can do something else to see if that light works. Okay, so little things like that. But the pre-flight, just the importance of a thorough pre-flight. We get complacent. They really emphasize the importance of that.
Yeah. Let me ask you, John,
Yeah.
when you're doing these pre-flights, are you going underneath the engine
I do.
and taking a look at?
I do.
Okay.
Yep, I do. I check all of the hoses. I check all the hoses if I can, and I check all of the belts. And I run my fingers through the starter, make sure there's all the teeth are there. I look at the I look at the throttle body. I check the linkage. I get under there. I like to do that. But I like being around motors and engines to begin with. So like to me, it's kind of fun. I don't think it's fun for everybody, especially if the conditions are so that you don't want to be in there, right?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. But I mean, I got that from tours, and tours we always did that. But I know in a lot of flight schools they don't teach that.
No,
but
they don't.
It's always good. Take a flashlight, look underneath. Are you getting oil in there? Because you could prevent yourself, especially if you see a bunch of oil in the belly. You know something's going on.
Something's going on. Yep. And what I liked, what I liked about what G said was when you walk around, bring a rag with you, wipe up some of the stuff. Start, get ahead of it getting to a soppy mess, but it will. But if you're not the only pilot doing that, it's going to be hard to maintain that. But like, try to just what would oil on hot components like the exhaust, for example, what threat could that be, or what danger could that be? And it's engine fire potentially, right? So there's a lot of things that I think we become complacent about that lead to accidents, and so complacency is one of the big things we discussed. All right, let's talk a little bit about day 4, and then I'll talk about my flight. Day 4, we got into dynamic rollover. Basically, when you spool up your helicopter and you're running at 102, or 101, or 104%, depending on the helicopter, you're basically at flight. You consider the helicopter in flight mode, right? Even though it's on the ground, it's flight ready. It's in flight mode. So really, as opposed to 1 foot on the pedals or 2 foot on the pedals, 1 foot on the pedals is not recommended. It's both feet on the pedals, as it says in the POH. It doesn't say don't put 1 foot, but it says put 2 feet. And so we want to just kind of, there's a reason behind that. And, if you shift or you maneuver or you kind of move around in the helicopter, you could have that 1 foot kind of slip to one side or the other. Maintenance personnel and pilots get into a scenario where they're too hard on one pedal, generally the left pedal over the other, and helicopters spin all the time on the ground. They'll spin 27, 30 times before they come to a stop at times and before it's corrected. And the centrifugal force that is enacted on the pilot, there was a video and the headsets flew off of the pilots, stuck to the instrument cluster, and as the helicopter was spinning, it was forced against the instrument cluster. It was that much centrifugal force. So to train for this, we don't necessarily want to put ourselves in that situation, but again, mitigate the problem by kind of managing that power. And then we talked a lot about the tail rotor and tail rotor strikes, main rotor strikes, but really the engineering of the tail rotor, which I found pretty fascinating. We know that the 22 spins counterclockwise and the 44 spins clockwise. So what did Robinson do to kind of help increase that tail rotor thrust on the 22 where it's running into the downwash of the main rotor if it's spinning counterclockwise? And so some of the things they do, they created the delta hinge, which I think we all know this, and that allows the helicopter the rotor blade to be a little bit closer to the empennage and to the horizontal or the vertical stabilizer. Gives you a little bit more authority. And then Frank changed the aerodynamics of the airfoil to be more to have more authority, because he had come from Hughes and he had kind of done a little bit of that there. So he just kind of did that over at at Robinson, or when he created the R22. Now, when they created the 44, the gearbox is such that it allows for the tail rotor to spin clockwise, and that allows for a considerably better tail rotor authority. In fact, it's so effective that you can easily get into those scenarios where you have kind of on the ground sort of spinning And that was something that kind of brought into perspective. So basically, when you're in full power, just assume that you're in flight. Everybody pinches the cyclic between their legs. That leads to a number of problems. When you're fully run up, you need to make sure that your hands are on the controls as they should be. Nothing pinched between your legs. Also, if your cyclic friction is not effective enough where it actually keeps the cyclic or the collective from moving, those things need to be adjusted by maintenance. You should never have your hands off the controls, obviously, when you're run up. But when you're not run up above governor RPM, you should be able to take your hands off those controls and not have to pinch them between your legs. The cyclic friction should do the job. And if it's not, then that's a maintenance issue. And that's just a matter of adjusting a nut, basically. Maintenance should be able to handle that. There's a lot more, obviously, that was useful. There's a lot more discussion on a number of things. Those are some of the key points that I wanted to address. I also want to talk a little bit about the flight portion. That I would say was, to me, that was something I was looking forward to the most. I didn't realize how detailed that flight portion would be. I like ground just as much as not just as much, but I like ground a lot. And so I really enjoyed the ground portion. I learned a ton. But the flight portion, what I really liked was the emphasis on following the POH to the standard for the auto rotations. We don't need to do anything beyond what the POH really says. So we're lowering collective, a right pedal, aft cyclic, and then once we're established in our glide, we aft cyclic load that rotor disc. Then we kind of push for that 70 knots. Once we're established in that glide at 70 knots, we might need to bump up a little bit. Before we bump up, we're going to roll off, obviously, right? So down right aft, establish our glide, roll off, or roll off, establish our glide, and then do that little bit of bump up. But once we get there, the instructor's hands off the collective. It was just cyclic, and at that, we knew our glide, we knew our ratio, we knew our glide descent, we were establishing that glide, and we were headed exactly where we intended on going. And that's that. I mean, we all train for this. We all know. I'll get into our auto rotations in different ways. But if you're making a lot of adjustments on the collective, you shouldn't have to touch it. And I knew that, but it was really reinforced here, especially on the 22 with very low inertia. So it was really reinforced, and it was great. I entered my autos, and I took my hand off the collective. In fact, he covered the RPM and the RPM gauge and the airspeed indicator. So I was just flying once I was established, and you can feel it. You watching your attitude, you can tell basically off how that compass is moving. If you are moving too far forward, if you're going too far aft, if you're increasing or decreasing airspeed, you can feel it. And so we started all of our autos from at least 1,000 feet AGL. No sense in doing them at 500. Might as well start them from higher. Allow yourself some time to feel that glide, to feel to understand what that attitude looks like, and fly based off attitude. And that's what I mean. The first one was a little rough, but by the end, I was flying based off attitude, and I felt really good. Gentle flare as we come down. We do our 200 foot. We're doing it at 300 feet. 300 feet AGL check. Make sure we're straight and level. Make sure that we're not making any more turns. Make sure our RPMs are where we want them. Then we can initiate our flare rather than just roll on and fly away. So gentle baby flare. Start to slow down the helicopter, build those RPMs a little bit. Then we get into our big flare. And this is something that I found fascinating. I had not known this, and this could just be my lack of training and knowledge. We're obviously learning a lot, and always constantly learning. But there's no need to crack on the throttle. As we pull collective, the correlator at around 17 inches takes over. The correlator takes over. And as you pull more collective, what happens? The governor takes over at 80 RPM, and it just pulls the RPM up. So we didn't even need to crack on throttle. We're just using the correlator as we pull collective to level the ship, or to kind of slow the ship, and then forward cyclic to level the ship. So the correlator did all the work. The governor did all the work. I didn't even need to crack the throttle on at all. And I have a history of holding that throttle because I'm freaking panicked, staring at the ground, like, oh, and potentially getting into an overspeed situation. I haven't done it, but I've gotten close, and my instructors have stopped it from happening. So if the mechanics are working the way they should, you shouldn't even need to roll throttle on. And I did 3 autos without rolling throttle at all.
John, whereabouts are you flying in your day-to-day flying? Where are you geographically?
Right. Good question. So how do DAs come and play with this, right?
That's what I was going to say, because that doesn't work for us at our DA. We've hosted the Robinson CFI standardization course, and we tried to, I wish it would, because it makes, as you said, it makes it so much less likely of an overspeed.
Right.
But at certain elevations, that just doesn't work.
Right. And at lower at lower DAs it works, right? And and that's a good point. I think that where you fly dictates how you fly, especially in high DA scenarios. So and when I do fly in Denver and we do crack on throttle, but I also am curious, is it necessary up here? I haven't tried not doing it. So say we're at Jay, say we're at like 7,000. What DAs in a Raven 1? Is it, you think it would still be required?
I don't know. I mean, we fly 22s and Raven 2s, Beta 2s and Raven 2s at 3,500.
Okay.
And then the summer gets up to easily above 7,000. But DA, and we've just, maybe in the winter we can get away with it, but we've had people come over from the other side of the mountains where they use this technique. And we've tried to do it, and we've got low RPM, and we've nearly done a full down. So again, I really wish it would work, because it certainly takes away the threat of an overspeed if you don't manipulate the throttle.
Right.
And G came up actually to fly with us. He hosted the CFI standardization course last year at our flight school, and he and I went out, and it just doesn't work everywhere. But I agree, if you can get that to work in a Raven, 44 might be a bit more. It's got a bit more grunt with just 2 people in, so maybe.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, good. So it's good to know it's not a. G did not mention that, and I kind of grilled him about it. I didn't grill him about it, but I asked a lot of questions about that, and he didn't really elaborate on that. It may not work at certain altitudes, though. We didn't. I guess or maybe just. I don't know. I'm curious about that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jay. Where's your school? Where are you flying? What are you flying?
Yeah, sure. I work for Leading Edge Flight Academy out of Bend, Oregon.
Sure. They talk a lot about you.
G's awesome. The course is awesome.
I'm
so glad you got to go to it, and it's a fantastic course. So we fly 22s, 44s, Beta 2, Raven 2, and then we've got some 206 stuff we do as well. But for the most part, it's day to day is those little R22s just running around and trying to keep it in the green, right?
Yeah. So are you basically pushing the limits of the 22 where you guys are at your DAs and your altitude?
It depends. Where our biggest problem is, you sort of talked about it a little bit, was with carb heat. In those shoulder months going before the summer temperatures really kick in, and while we're still using carb heat in spring and fall, that's where we get our biggest problems, is where historically we've had some issues where instructors and students have just expected to be able to pull that extra 1.5 inches because the safety nurse says you can, and they hadn't. And we changed our procedures pretty heavily with training, and we changed our pre-flight checklist and everything to include a modified version of that full throttle. So we actually had a little bit more padding based on our testing. And that's our biggest challenge is coming into a confined off airport at elevation with carb heat. You have to take that 2,000 foot additional ground effect. It says it may be an additional. You have to take that really seriously, and you have to you have to plan to get full throttle. You have to know where that is and plan around that.
Yeah, because the graph will show you clearly where that full throttle is, whereas that chart it's not as clear if it's even decipherable at all, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think the I think they know that, and I think G probably talked to you about it in the safety courses. That was maybe a little bit of a mistake that they went to the chart versus the graph. But
yeah, he blamed it on pilots.
Even the right, simple, keep it simple.
Yeah.
But even the graph, I think we've redrawn that line a little bit further to the left to add a little bit of padding. From our training, I took all the R-22s out in the fleet, and we found we were hitting full throttle most of the time below that line. So we added some extra padding there.
Awesome. Would you be open to sharing that graph in the Discord, your graphs?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
That would be fantastic, immensely helpful, because those, even the ones that in the POHs, that like there isn't one for a beta 2 which I found kind of peculiar. So I keep searching, but yeah, whatever you have, that I would really find that valuable. I'm going to add some components to it. And if you guys have anything that you'd like to see that I from the presentation that I can share in the chat, I'd be happy to do that. Jay, thanks for being here. I've seen a lot of your videos online. Glad you're part of the group. Feel free to contribute and join. By the way, if there's something that you want to discuss specifically, address maybe just some experiences from your flight school, or what students can expect, or what your opinion on the nature of the industry is right now. Feel free to jump in and give us a little bit of a presentation on the next study group or one down the road. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I want to, once you finish the presentation day, if you have a second or two after the recording, I wouldn't mind chatting to you for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. I think that's pretty much kind of transitioned into the end of my discussion. The only thing I really wanted to add was the confidence that I kind of walked away with from the study, from the safety course was I'm grateful for it. I was looking for it. I wanted to walk out of there feeling more competent and safer pilot, and I did. I am in fact going to go back to California and fly with Jason, who was my instructor from, I think, Rogue, not a school not far away. He was just really, I had a great rapport with him. And I really enjoyed flying with him. He started to understand where my kind of fears and concerns were and things that I wanted to work on, and he really helped me kind of walk through a number of those things and gave me a lot of confidence. My check ride has been pushed back. Unfortunately, it's now the second week of April. I was hoping to get it done in March, but that gives me more time. I'm coming up on my limit on hours, but I'm just going to keep flying and kind of staying proficient. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the course. So for those of you watching, if you're in debate of whether to go or not, I think it's money well spent. So that would kind of other Jay, is there anything you want to add? I think this wraps up my portion of the event.
No, I was gonna ask just with the personal changes, I guess. So G is running it now since Bob left, right? Okay. Is he? Do they have somebody else that's helping him out,
G
or
and
is he
Isaac
doing it all?
Yeah, G and Isaac is the other guy.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Cool. G said he's done 20 years of these courses. So I mean, the dude's awesome. I mean, he knows everybody. Everybody knows him. So glad to know him. Got to crack some good jokes with him. Hopefully I left a little bit of an impact, but I thought they were great guys.
Yeah, I recommend either if they bring the course like they did for Jay, or at least if you're gonna keep flying Robbie, go at least every 5 years.
Yeah,
just because it changes.
Yeah.
People think, oh, I already been there, I don't need to go. No, go. It's worth it.
They asked for some suggestions to make the class better. I like some tangible features. I wanted to see a carburetor, right? I wanted to see. I wanted to hold the tail rotors. I wanted to kind of get a little bit more hands on some of the show me how the governor works, and more mechanical kind of hands on elements. So that's one thing I recommended. Also, I was hoping that we could potentially share the list, because he starts the whole thing by saying, hey, this is a networking event as much as it is a training event. You network and talk with people, and we're all chatting, but it's hard to get numbers from everybody there. I thought also maybe potentially sharing the if just make that a check mark. Hey, are you willing to share your information with the rest of other students? I thought that would be beneficial, because I was happy to network and talk with all those guys. I mean, everybody in there was so super awesome, and it was just fun. Everyone has their own experience, and I just like talking this stuff. So, yeah, cool. Thanks, dudes. Well, I'm gonna cut the recording, but I think we should.